Hey guys, you ever have one of those days where you think, yep, I'm just going to do my usual thing, and then boom, you end up neck deep in a mystery that could have easily been a bad Netflix drama? This is one of those. And I'll be honest, you probably won't survive this level of weird without a strong coffee and maybe a blanket to hide under. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Oh, and tell me where you're watching from, man, what time at ice, because I'm about to drop you into a storm that changed everything. Calvin Harper, ex-Navy, part-time philosopher of tide patterns, and full-time stubborn fisherman. Figures he's seen it all. Waves taller than his mast? Check. Flying fish that smack you right in the face? Sadly, check. But this particular evening, the Atlantic decides to throw him a curveball that even his decades of sea legs aren't ready for. The sky turns that unsettling shade between gunmetal and you should head home, lightning slicing it open like jagged glass, and yet Calvin stays out. Because apparently the laws of common sense don't apply to him when there's one last net to haul in. By the time he limps into the inlet, rain's pounding so hard you'd swear Poseidon himself was auditioning for a heavy metal band. The dock lantern's a ghostly blur in the distance. He's soaked through, salt stinging his eyes, but he ties off the skiff like it's just another Tuesday. That night, sleep's impossible. The wind's rattling the windows like it's trying to break in, and the roof's doing a percussion solo. Morning's no better, fog thick as chowder, driftwood scattered like matchsticks, and that weird smell the ocean gets after it's rearranged half the coastline. Calvin's scanning the shallows for debris because you'd be surprised how many lost coolers and half-sunk dinghies turn up after a blow when he spots it. Not wood, not plastic, something symmetrical, deliberate, half-submerged against the rocks. He wades in, rope at his waist, current tugging like a toddler with sticky hands. Up close, it's a coffin metal, barnacle-scarred, engraved faintly with patterns historians still argue whether were decorative or symbolic. Bolts fused with rust line the rim. The thing feels wrong in the way only objects that have no business being in your reality can feel. He hauls it out with every muscle screaming, dragging it to the dock where it sits silent, waiting like it knows he's going to open it, no matter how much his gut says bad idea. By dawn, the coffin has turned from weird find to center of Calvin's entire brain. He's pacing his little shack like a cat in a thunderstorm, coffee cooling untouched, boots already on. The fog hasn't lifted, it clings low and damp, muting the world, but the coffin's there at the dock's end, slick with condensation like it's been breathing all night. Up close, the barnacles are easier to pry off, and beneath them, he finds 3 letters. HCW, carved in a script so old-fashioned it looks like it belongs in a museum. Below it, a faint emblem circular, military looking half-eaten by time. Calvin's curiosity clicks into overdrive. The crowbar comes out. The grinder hums. Sparks spit against the mist. It's grueling work. Every bolt is like wrestling a steel-toothed alligator, but he's done worse, patching Navy hulls in whether you'd politely describe as trying to kill you. One by one, the bolts give, except the last, a stubborn relic refusing to surrender. It takes another morning before the final bolt breaks, and when it does, the hiss of stale, century-old air is enough to raise goosebumps under his jacket. The lid groans open, and instead of a body, because let's be real, that's what he expected, he finds parcels, oilcloth wrapped and leather strapped. Inside, gold coins stamped with mid-1800s crests, ingots like molten sunlight caught mid-pour, and jewelry that looks like it's been plucked straight from a Victorian portrait. There's even a Confederate sealed document, and tucked in a corner, a locket engraved to I.H., my steadfast hand in the storm. I.H. Harper. Elijah Harper. Calvin's grandfather used to spin half-believed porch stories about a free man of color, a sailor who smuggled secrets. Most folks wrote it off as family myth, the same way historians still argue whether certain Civil War blockade runners were heroes or opportunists. But here's proof, cradled in Calvin's weathered palm. He hides the treasure in his shed, but the locket stays close. Then the trouble starts. Slow trucks rolling past his property, familiar faces lingering too long at the general store. One night, he catches Jace Milner, a local with more ambition than sense, fumbling at the shed's lock. Calvin's Navy voice sharp, low, and carrying the kind of authority that made storm-tossed deckhands snap Tosin's Jace packing. But the message is clear. Words out. That night, under a moon smudged by cloud, Calvin sits on his porch, locket in hand. Elijah had hidden it gold, documents, history itself probably to keep it out of the wrong hands. And now Calvin's inherited that same problem. Keep it and risk every vulture in 3 counties? Or turn it over and maybe lose it forever? The tide slaps against the pilings like it's counting down. He knows he has to decide before the next set of headlights slows outside his gate. By the next morning, the decision's anchored in his chest. Calvin calls Hank Wallace, retired Coast Guard, steady as bedrock, and one of the few people in town who wouldn't try to haggle over gold like it was a yard sale find. He keeps it vague, historical value, needs securing, and Hank, after a pause that says this better be good, agrees to meet him at sunset with a historian from the state university. The day drags. Every groan of the dock, every shadow sliding across the window feels like it could be someone testing the lock again. As dusk smears the sky in muted orange, Calvin triple-checks the tarp over the coffin. The tide's hush is steady, but his nerves aren't. That's when gravel crunches outside slow, deliberate. Lights cut off. Doors slam. Not Hank. Not the historian. 3 figures at the shed Jace drawl, unmistakable even in whispers. Calvin slips into the shadows, Navy instincts sharp as ever. The knife's weight in his palm isn't a threat, it's insurance. He circles behind them, stepping into the dim glow of their flashlights. Step away. It's not loud, but it's final. The second man backs off immediately. The third hesitates, crowbar in hand, before following. Jace tries to hold his ground, puffed up defiance leaking into his voice, but Calvin closes the distance, eyes locked, tone iron. In less than a minute, the truck's tearing off down the road, gravel spitting in retreat. When Hank and the historian finally arrive, Calvin lays everything bare at Coffin, the gold, the documents, Elijah Harper. The historian handles each piece like it's made of spun glass, confirming details Calvin had guessed. Mid-19th century Southern elite, Confederate SEAL, blockade runner cargo. This isn't just treasure, the man says quietly. It's history. The state's historical commission takes over with Calvin officially listed as the legal discoverer. Under maritime salvage law, his finder's share tops $2 million, enough to rebuild his dock, replace his roof, and still have more left than he's ever dreamed of. But the real prize is intangible. Elijah's name cleared of myth, woven back into the record as a man who defied history's darker tide. Months later, Calvin stands in a softly lit exhibit hall. Glass cases hold the gold and jewels. The locket rests at the center, its inscription displayed for all to read. Visitors murmur, but Calvin's gaze is steady, anchored to that small oval of Metalla Bridge across a century. He uses part of his share to restore a neglected African-American cemetery, endows a scholarship in Elijah's name, and funds veteran programs. The rest? He keeps his life as it was up at dawn, skiff on the water, the sea's salt in his lungs. On the anniversary of the find, he stands by Elijah's new memorial navigator, patriot, and steadfast hand in the storm man, feels the circle close. That evening, at the end of his dock, the moon's reflection shivers in the tide. Somewhere beneath that vast water, more secret sleep. But for Calvin, one was enough because the ocean hadn't just given him treasure. It had returned his family's story. The air cools as night folds over the coast, the last light fading from the horizon until only the slow pulse of the tide marks the passage of time. Calvin stays at the dock's edge, the boards warm beneath him from the day's sun, the locket's curve smooth in his palm. The sounds are soft now, the faint creak of rope, a distant gull settling for the night, water tapping gently against the pilings like a heartbeat that has always been there, even before him. He lets his mind drift, not to the weight of gold or the gleam of jewels, but to Elijah imagining his ancestors standing on another deck in another century, scanning this same stretch of water with the same stubborn resolve. The thought brings a calm that is rare, as if across all the years, the sea itself has carried a message meant just for him. Somewhere far offshore, a ship's horn moans low, and the sound threads through the fog in long, unbroken lines. The scent of salt and pine drifts together, wrapping around him in a way that feels like home. He knows the world beyond his quiet cove will keep moving, that people will come and go to see the treasures in glass cases, to read the neatly printed stories, and to trace the name Elijah Harper on the plaque. But here, now, there's only the water, the moonlight, and the steady rhythm that has defined his life. Calvin slips the locket back into his pocket, stands, and walks slowly toward the warm glow of his porch light. Behind him, the tide keeps its patient work, carrying whispers from the deep, keeping its secrets until another storm decides it's time to let one go.